Good evening. Thank you for joining the Division of Air Quality's public hearing on the North Carolina Renewable Power Permit. It is currently 6:02. We will begin the hearing at 6:03. Thank you.
Okay, Matt, start recording if you haven't already. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 6:03 p.m. on Monday, February 21st, 2022. This virtual public hearing is now considered to be open. My name is Will Wyke, and I am the Compliance Supervisor for the North Carolina Division of Air Quality's Raleigh Regional Office. I have been appointed to be the hearing officer for this virtual public hearing by the Director of the Division of Air Quality, Mike Abrazinskis. My purpose this evening is to receive in an orderly manner your oral comments for consideration in the issuance of an air quality permit to North Carolina Renewable Power, Lumberton LLC, for a permit modification to implement best available control technology on the facility's boilers and other emission sources to meet the requirements of a 2017 Special Order of Consent, SOC. The facility currently holds Title V Air Permit number 05543T28, issued on July 29th, 2021, with an expiration date of August 31st, 2022, for an electrical generating facility located at 1866 Hestertown Road, Lumberton, North Carolina. The current Title V permit allows the facility to burn wood, poultry cake, and poultry litter in 2 boilers to generate steam that is used to generate electricity in the existing turbine. Under the current operating permit, the facility has been classified as a minor source based on accepted enforceable limits of 250 tons per year for multiple pollutants regulated under the Prevention of Significant Deterioration PSD program. The draft permit, which is the focus of this hearing, reclassifies the facility as a PSD major source to reflect the current emissions, operating scenarios, and additional boiler modifications, and requires the facility to implement BACT on its boilers and other emission sources. The focus of this hearing is to receive public comments on the proposed air permit for the North Carolina Renewable Power Lumberton LLC as they relate to the applicability of air quality regulations. The Division of Air Quality is conducting this public hearing digitally to allow for the public participation while protecting public health under current guidance to prevent the spread of COVID-19. This revised public hearing announcement was published in the Robesonian and the DAQ's website on January 19th, 2022, granting an extension to the original 30-day comment period and rescheduling of the virtual public hearing. The Division of Air Quality regulations for the issuance of a Title V permit does require a hearing or comment period for the issuance of this permit. The required 30-day public notice for this virtual public hearing was published, as previously stated, on January 19th, 2022 in the Robesonian and on the DAQ's website. The comment period for this permit opened on December 15th, 2021, and will close on February 24th, 2022. The required duration for the comment period is 30 days per our 15A NCAC 2Q0300 rules. The comment period for this permit will have been a total of 71 days. In addition to your oral comments tonight, the division is also accepting comments via mail, electronic mail, and by phone to a voicemail box. The email address is daq.publiccomments@ncdenr.gov. The phone number with a voicemail box is 919-707-8714. During this public hearing tonight, we will be receiving oral comments from those individuals who pre-registered to speak at this event. If you are having technical difficulties with WebEx, you can use the chat feature in WebEx to ask questions or seek assistance. You can also visit the Division of Air Quality's website using the link in the public notice for this hearing for instructions on various ways to connect to WebEx. Joining me in this hearing tonight by WebEx are from DAQ's Raleigh Central Office, Michael Pagetra, Deputy Director for the Division of Air Quality, Betty Gaetano, Permitting Section Engineer 3 for the Division of Air Quality, and Matt Porter, Meteorologist with the Air Quality Analysis Branch. And from DAQ's Fayetteville Regional Office, we have Heather Carter, Regional Supervisor, and Evangeline Lowry Jacobs, Engineer 1 and Inspector for the North Carolina Renewable Power Lumberton LLC facility. Now I would like to take the opportunity to recognize any local dignitaries such as town mayors, city or county officials, or state elected legislators that are present. Thank you for your time and commitment to this public hearing. I want to thank everyone involved in getting this public hearing scheduled and organized, with a special thanks to Matt Porter for his technical expertise in setting up this event. Copies of the permit application, the air permit application review, the draft air permit, and other information concerning the North Carolina Renewable Power Lumberton LLC application are available to the public at the following locations: the Division of Air Quality, Fayetteville Regional Office, located at the Sistel Building at 225 Green Street, Suite 714, Fayetteville, North Carolina, 28301, and the Division of Air Quality Central Office, Permit Section, located at 217 West Jones Street in Raleigh, North Carolina, 27603. If you haven't already done so and wish to review these materials in person, they are available to you during normal business hours at the locations I just mentioned. However, due to COVID-19, an appointment is required. Please call in advance to make an appointment. A copy of the draft air permit and the permit application review are also available on the Division of Air Quality's website at www.ncair.org. The order of the events for this hearing are as follows. First, Ms. Betty Gaetano of DAQ's Central Office Permitting Section, who reviewed the permit application and wrote the draft permit, will discuss the application DAQ received from North Carolina Renewable Power Lumberton LLC for their air permit and the air permitting procedures. This will be followed by the public comment period. We will receive oral comments from those individuals who pre-registered to speak at this event. If you registered and your name was not called, there will be time allowed after the last pre-registered name has been called to receive your comment. This will allow us to have an accurate hearing record. To provide enough time for public comments, this meeting will be conducted in the following manner. All efforts will be made to call speakers in the same order of your registrations. Oral statements will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. I will call the names of each of the pre-registered speakers in order, and our WebEx host will unmute the speaker when it is their turn to speak. I will also announce the name of the next speaker in the queue so they can prepare to provide their comments when their names are called to speak. Please do not start speaking until the WebEx host has indicated that your microphone has been unmuted. Your time will begin when the WebEx host has unmuted your microphone. I will monitor your time and will announce when your 3 minutes have expired. Please respect the time of all those who wish to present oral comments tonight by adhering to the time limits and closing your remarks as quickly as possible once time is up. Cross-examination of the person presenting comments will not be allowed. However, as a hearing officer, I may ask questions to the presenter for clarification. Questions directed to Division of Air Quality staff members will not be answered during this hearing. If you have questions for DAQ staff, we can provide you with our contact information so you may contact them after the meeting during normal business hours. After receiving comments this evening, the hearing record will be closed. However, the period for submitting comments does not close until February 24th, 2022 at 5 p.m. You have until February 24th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to submit additional written comments. Again, the focus of this hearing is to receive oral comments related to air quality issues associated with issuing an air quality permit to North Carolina Renewable Power Lumberton LLC and the applicability of air quality regulations. Only relevant air quality comments can be considered in my final recommendations to our division director. I will now call on Ms. Betty Gaetano of DAQ's Central Office Permitting Section to discuss the air permitting procedures and permit application review.
Thank you, Will. Good evening. My name is Betty Gaetano, and I'm the permitting engineer for the PSD application for this facility. Next slide, please. North Carolina Renewable Power Lumberton LLC, referred to as North Carolina Renewable Power or the permittee throughout this presentation, currently holds Title V Air Permit number 05543 T28, issued on July 29, 2021, with an expiration date of August 31, 2022, for a power plant in Lumberton, Robeson County, North Carolina. North Carolina Renewable Power fires wood, poultry litter, and poultry cake in its two Stoker boilers, considered non-commercial and industrial solid waste incineration, or non-SISWI. The boilers produce steam used to generate electricity in the existing turbine, and electricity is sold to the local utility. Condensed hot water from the steam turbine is used as the heat source for the facility's belt dryers. The facility also includes insignificant activities such as poultry litter storage, poultry litter and biohandling equipment, storage tanks, and an emergency generator. Next slide, please. On May 29, 2015, Title V Air Permit number 05543 T21 was issued to the permittee, allowing only non-SISWI subject wood and poultry litter to be fired in the boilers. This permit also limited facility-wide emissions of carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur dioxide to 250 tons per year each to establish the facility as a minor source under Prevention of Significant Deterioration, or PSD regulations. Since issuance of this Title V permit, North Carolina Renewable Power has difficulty meeting the 250 tons per year limit for carbon monoxide emissions, and the permittee was required by a special order by consent, or SOC, to submit a retroactive PSD application to apply best available control technology, or BACT, to the 2015 modification. Next slide, please. The required permit application number 16617C was received on March 29, 2017 and was deemed technically complete on October 29, 2017 with submittal of the required air dispersion modeling. The permit application establishes backed and associated emission limits for the boilers at the facility. Backed includes the following: selective non-catalytic reduction for control of nitrogen oxides, dry sorbent injection for control of sulfur dioxide and sulfuric acid mists, a multi-clone and baghouse for control of particulate matter, PM10 and PM2.5, and good combustion practices to minimize emissions of volatile organic compounds, carbon monoxide, and greenhouse gases. The permit application also establishes back for the poultry litter warehouse and 3 of the facility's belt dryers. These emission sources were added as part of the 2015 modification to permit poultry litter as fuel in the boilers. All proposed changes to the permit are addressed in the draft PSD permit application review and the draft PSD permit, both of which are available for review on DAQ's website. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. At this time, we will hear from those who pre-registered to provide oral comments this evening. When your name is called, our WebEx host will unmute your microphone so that you may provide your comments. To ensure our records are complete, please clearly state your name and who you are representing. Your comments will be recorded, so please speak loudly and clearly towards your computer's microphone or telephone speaker. Please do not start speaking until the WebEx host has indicated that your microphone has been unmuted. If you are using a telephone, please press *3 to raise your hand so the WebEx host can identify your line to be unmuted. This is critically important for the clarity of your comments. Please turn down any speakers that you may have that can create feedback. If there is a significant feedback on your line, we may need to mute your call and attempt to come back to you later. If we call your name but cannot hear you after you have been unmuted, please check to see if you are muted on the WebEx screen on your computer. If you are having audio issues, try a different method of audio connection within WebEx or use the Call Me feature to have WebEx call your personal telephone. If we still cannot hear you, we will proceed to the next registered speaker, but we'll call your name again at the end of the hearing. I will do my best to pronounce your names correctly and apologize in advance for any errors. As I call on speakers, I will also announce the next speaker so that they can be prepared to speak next. We will now begin taking oral comments. Our first speaker is Anita Cunningham, followed by Stephen Norris.
Hi, my name is Anita Cunningham, and I am a resident of Lumberton, North Carolina, Robeson County, the location of the North Carolina Renewable Power Plant. I live on the south side of the tracks as the same as the plant, less than 2 miles away. First, I would like to thank you for having me provide these public comments. And secondly, I am going to ask you that you shut down the North Carolina Renewable Power Plant here in Lumberton. North Carolina Renewable Power has continuously been issued notices of deficiency and violation since 2015. Since that time, NCRP, which is North Carolina Renewable Power, has been issued a dozen violations and deficiencies and almost $60,000 in fines. These violations and deficiencies have included existing emissions, exceeding emissions limits, poor maintenance, deficient monitoring and record keeping, and reporting issues. It is clear with the length of the time that they have been operating and given the number and continuous violations that fines are not a deterrent for this company. In fact, they are seeking to make the violations and deficiencies retroactively absolved. It is incredulous to me that not just that they are still operating, having given such a record of emissions violations, but mostly because of the request to absolve the previous violations and deficiencies. In light of this information, I ask you to please help me and my community by shutting down the North Carolina Renewable Power Plant located in Lumberton, North Carolina, and let the members of my community live and breathe free from yet more toxic pollutants here in this community. It is clear that fines are not a deterrent for North Carolina Renewable Power. I live and love this community here in North Carolina, and I would appreciate it if you would consider my comments and the information that I've given you seriously and shut down this company. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. The next, Stephen Norris is up next, to be followed by Kay Rybold.
I believe he's a call-in user, Will. So see if this is him.
Okay. Is this Stephen?
Stephen, have you raised your hand by pressing *3? I've unmuted your line. You can give your comments. I've unmuted him. He's not speaking.
Okay, well,
Stephen, you may need to press *6 to unmute your line. You're unmuted on our end.
I thought I just heard something.
It may be his connection.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Stephen, we'll circle back to you at the end. And this is just part of the part of dealing with digital. So we'll go to Kay Rybold, and to be followed by Lib Hutchby.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I've unmuted your line.
All right, thank you. Hello, my name is Kay, and it's Rybold, but thanks for trying. That's okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. I live in Tuscarora and Catawba Indigenous Peoples lands in present-day Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a member of APPLE, the Alliance to Protect the People and Places We Live. I appreciate the opportunity to give my comments at today's hearing. I feel strongly that the North Carolina DEQ should deny the air quality permit to NC Renewable Power for its chicken and wood waste facility in Lumberton, North Carolina. Not only do I feel that the permit should be denied, but I urge DEQ to consider shutting down this deeply harmful facility permanently. It is time to stop the immoral and unjust decisions by the DEQ to continue approving air and water quality permits that harm the people of North Carolina. NCRP is a major source of pollution in Lumberton. It has violated numerous special orders of consent. Why should DEQ reward this destructive facility with another operating permit when it has continually violated other air permits in the past years? Please, we urge you to think about this. The facility has refused to use best available control technology with its emissions, and it continues to underestimate the emissions of hazardous air pollutants from the facility. They are not using monitors to adequately monitor pollutants. It's time, once again, for DEQ to stop approving air and water permits for industry that harms communities and the environment. DEQ has not only a professional responsibility, but a moral and ethical obligation to protect North Carolina communities from air and water pollution. The plant is a major emitter of carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, particulates, hazardous air pollutants, toxic air pollutants, and a range of other potentially dangerous emissions. And some of these health issues will be addressed by others in the hearing. DEQ must start considering the environmental justice communities and the issue of cumulative impact that these communities have experienced and their untold suffering because of dirty industries in the area. Why won't DEQ consider the harm that is inflicted on the Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income communities that facilities like this one inflict? How would you feel living in Robeson County next to this facility? Please deny this permit and use your authority to shut down this facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rebold. The next speaker is Lib Hutchby, to be followed by Daisha Williams.
My name is Lib Hutchby. I reside in Occoneechee Territory and at 108 Standish Drive in Chapel Hill. I grew up loving farming life and understand the importance of clean air and clean water for all species who live, whether on a farm or in Lumberton, a city that is one of the most diverse in language and culture in the state. Clean air and clean water are essential to everyone, regardless of language or ethnicity. It is important to note that North Carolina Renewable Power is not operating in a moral way. It should not be allowed to operate at all. It should not be allowed to expand. Their pattern so far has been violation after violation, pay the fine, and violate some more. That's not being a good neighbor. NCRP has multiple incident reports because they have multiple sources of pollution and/or incident reports on the same site. As DEQ is well aware, the NCRP site is an inactive hazardous waste site because it is a documented Brownsville program site and has an air quality permit with numerous violations and special orders by consent. Noting that in 2013, Lumberton was considered to be the poorest city in North Carolina, it's essential that we look at the report that North Carolina Renewable Power wrote regarding the draft environmental justice report. I read that report and it is dated November 2nd, 2021. I found on pages 29 and 30, dated 2015, the following 7 potential limited English proficiency language groups were identified during the initial screening of demographic data: Spanish or Spanish Creole, French, Vietnamese, and other Asian languages. However, none of the language groups identified reached the 5%. And so if the larger LEP groups are identified during the permit process or specific translation requests are received, DEQ will revisit the safe harbor guidelines. Has DEQ revisited the safe harbor guidelines, and to whom in these language groups has translation been provided?
Ms.
Please
Hutchby,
do not grant a permit
please.
to the NCRP in Lumberton. Show hospitality. Lumberton has showed hospitality, but NCRP is causing premature deaths. DEQ,
Please wrap up your comments in the next 10 seconds, please.
You have
Your time
the
has expired.
authority to refuse their expansion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker is Daisha Williams, followed by Joel Porter.
Hi, yes, this is Deja Williams. I am with Clean Air NC. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Many who have already spoken have rightly pointed to the potential impacts to health and environmental quality if NC Renewable Power were to be able to operate with this permit. And like many have pointed out, considering the chronic and ongoing record of Clean Air Act violations this facility has had in the past 6 years in operation, these concerns are well founded. And if this new air permit were to get accepted, DEQ is essentially setting a status quo for this facility and ones just like it. And in addition, the draft permit fails to require adequate monitoring to protect air quality and public health. This creates serious concerns for the surrounding vulnerable populations in Lumberton, who already carry the disproportionate burdens associated with the industrial livestock production. And in the DEQ EJ report for this proposed site, it states that within the 1 mile radius surrounding the NCRP facility, it displays higher percentage of Black and Native American populations, as well as a per capita income level lower than the state in impacted census tracts. And not to mention that Robeson County is ranked 100 out of 100 in health outcomes and demonstrates a higher rate of all causes of death than anywhere in the state. This is in your own report. So in the best interest for environmental justice, it's troubling that DEQ would even consider authorizing a permit for this facility in this zip code where the population is clearly vulnerable and an environmental justice community and an impacted community. And environmental justice is a priority for both the Biden and Cooper administration. So the continued disproportionate harm that these operations have in low-income communities of color constitutes a clear violation of these priorities. DEQ really has the opportunity to uphold its intentions of environmental justice and make a decision that improves the lives of vulnerable North Carolina communities. Thus, we really urge you to do everything in your power to protect public health and to not issue air permits for facilities that demonstrate harm in already sensitive areas and vulnerable communities. And we also hope that if this permit does get approved, it's imperative that adequate monitoring and reporting requirements are put in place to protect and equip surrounding communities against exposure. But like I said, we really urge you not to issue permits in vulnerable communities. Thank you for your attention to these important matters.
Thank you, Deja, and sorry for mispronouncing your name. Joel Porter is next, to be followed by Bobby Gaffar.
Thanks. Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thanks, guys. Good evening. My name is Joel Porter. I am also with Clean Air NC as the policy manager there. Thank you for allowing the public an opportunity to raise issues with this facility's air emissions permit. NC Renewable Power has a long history of violating their permit. We are firm believers in second chances, but in this instance, that's not the case here. We're talking about the 11th, 12th chance. At what point does a bad actor stop getting chances? This permit will normalize NCRP's air emissions. They will continue to emit pollution in an airshed that is already overstressed due to a nearby coal-fired power plant and numerous other high-emitting sources. Recently enacted Executive Order 246 noted that the cumulative impacts of multiple sources of exposure to environmental stressors in communities and the roles of multiple decision-making entities in addressing the causes that compromise environmental health and quality of life requires an interagency response. DAQ is one such decision-making entity, and they have the authority to address cumulative impacts already. In this community, on this permit, DAQ should deny a final version of this permit. Estimated emission levels in this permit are far too low than what will actually be emitted. The permit does not adequately account for the emissions from the trucks transporting the poultry waste, the waste storage facility, and the processing equipment. Additionally, regularly monitoring, record keeping, and reporting should be done for each point in the offloading, storage, cake production, and incineration processes. Given the number of violations that this plant has had in its past, we encourage the division to reevaluate the best available control technology, and in instances where deference is given to good combustion practices or lower emitting fuels to instead weigh if better technological control equipment solutions exist, and that if the company has already installed and is currently using those technologies in its other facilities, then those technologies should and could be installed on this facility as well. We can study how agency decisions impact communities in varying ways later. This is a clear case where cumulative impacts have had a tangible negative effect on a community, and this plant's continued operations will only further exacerbate those impacts. We encourage DAQ to take our comments into account and ultimately hope that you will deny this permit. Thank you very much and have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Next, we have Bobby Gafar, if I pronounce that right. And up next will be Amina Gafar.
Good evening. My name is Bobby Jacobs Gafar. I'd like to acknowledge the land of my ancestors. I reside in the Deep Branch community. I'm originally from the area that is known as Hogtown in Robeson County. I live less than 5 miles from the current plant that DEQ is reviewing this evening. I'm the granddaughter of Gladys and Willie Son Jacobs and the great-granddaughter of Brady and Polly Strickland Locklear. My line makes up one of the 12 lines of what is known as the Enrolled Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. This is the original land that isolated people, including the Sara, the Tuscarora, and what we know today, the Eno, and many other tribes, the Kiowan, sought refuge when they were isolated from the colonization that came about in our past history. This land is vital. The land, the water, the air quality is vital to our way of life and our continued existence in North Carolina. We've enjoyed and have struggled to maintain good relationships with the government, with our land, and in balance with all the things that we have to go through. We absolutely do not need any more difficulty in terms of our air quality or our water quality here in Robeson County. I urge DEQ, under their wisdom and under their authority, to deny the expansion and the current operation of this organization. They're from Georgia. They're not from North Carolina. They've not been a good neighbor. They've had numerous violations. They don't have the best interest of our particular community in the best interest of North Carolina. It's within the jurisdiction of your agency to review the air quality permit and to deny it. I ask you as a neighbor who lives within 5 miles of this plant to deny it, so my grandchildren can enjoy the land that we have to live on. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. And next, Amina Gafar, followed by Patrick Anderson.
Hello, my name is Amina Gafar, and yes, I am Bobby Gafar's daughter. I am also a member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina and am coming to you today as an avid runner in Luther Britt Park, where it is evident that there has been disruption in the ecosystem in Luther Britt Park, where the plant is located. And not only is the odor pervasive and lingering, it's also having a heavy impact on the environment where our other brothers and sisters, the heron, the geese, and the fish, and all the other animals are also living as well. And I'd also like to point out that Robeson County is tired of being an energy sacrifice zone. We should not have to take the brunt of the impact of the bad to sacrifice our areas, to sacrifice our health to be the providers of energy for the state of North Carolina. And it's beyond me that we continue to be victims of, or the sacrificial lambs for energy production in North Carolina. And we're tired of being overburdened. We're tired of being the ones who have to take the impact of these bad actors in our communities. And as my mother was saying, we have to think about our future generations. I don't want my niece and nephew to grow up in a community where they can't go outside and play. I don't want my grandmother to have to continue to worry about developing some cancer because she lives right down the street from this area also. And these are things that we need to consider, the generational impact and also the cumulative impact that continues to put us in a position where our people are sacrificed for the benefit of other people throughout the state. And I will concede the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next up will be Patrick Anderson, to be followed by Kathy Buckley.
Hi, I just want to check that you can hear me. I'm on a new computer tonight.
Yep, I can hear you perfectly fine.
Great, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for holding this hearing. My name is Patrick Anderson. I'm an attorney with the Environmental Integrity Project. I'll also be submitting written comments, but given the compliance history of this facility and the community that's being impacted, I really wanted to take this opportunity to highlight at least two significant issues with the draft permit. First, I want to discuss air toxics, also known as hazardous air pollutants, that are being emitted by this facility. In particular, after NCRP acquired the facility, they applied to DEQ to install belt dryers, up to 4 of them, and also a drum dryer. To my knowledge, they've already installed 3 of them, and they are in operation. But it turns out, just like with carbon monoxide, those units wound up emitting far more VOCs and air toxics than initially believed. This was confirmed in testing in 2018. My concern is that NCRP has only quantified 2 air toxics from these dryers, formaldehyde and methanol. We know from a whole line of stack testing in the wood pellet industry that drying and processing wood emits basically 6 air toxics or HAPs, more than just formaldehyde and methanol. The other 4 are acetaldehyde, acrolein, phenol, and propionaldehyde. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, the permit record and NCRP's applications are completely devoid of any inclusion of these 4 other organic HAPs from their quantification of the facility's potential to emit for HAPs. So the facility is claiming that they're an area source or minor source of HAPs, but when you include these other 4 HAPs, by every way that I can possibly calculate it, even given the benefit of the doubt to the company, they are in fact a major source, which means the boilers and everything else they really need to be subject to the major source NESHAP, and currently they're subject to the area source, which is far less stringent. And particularly what we've heard from the community tonight, maybe the bigger impact is that, from what I can tell, NCRP has never conducted any air dispersion modeling to assess the impacts on health and the environment from any of the 6 organic HAPs emitted from the dryers, but especially the 4 that they've completely omitted from their application. I realize I only have 30 seconds left. That took me longer than I wanted. But I also want to highlight that the backed limits that this facility has proposed are far too lenient. We have seen other poultry-fired power plants achieve far lower emission limits as their back limits, and those should qualify here. So I urge you to really take a deep look at this application, given the context of where we are, and scrutinize. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. And thanks everybody for sticking to the time for the most part. Makes it much easier. Next up, we have Kathy Buckley, to be followed by Jeff Hunt.
Jeff.
Thank you. My name is Kathy Buckley. I'm staff to NC Apple, the Alliance to Protect Our People and the Places We Live. I live in Raleigh, the occupied land of the Kahari, Cherokee, Lumbee, and other tribes. This facility creates a product that relies totally on government subsidies, also known as taxpayer dollars. Duke Energy is required to purchase that product, helping to satisfy the utility's clean energy mandates and crowding out real renewable and clean energy like solar and wind. The facility pollutes our air breathed by our neighbors, including infiltrating the lungs and bloodstreams of their children. The owners have racked up many violations and now request a permit to be allowed to pollute more. In summary, North Carolina taxpayers are being asked to pay polluters to befoul our state so Duke Energy can provide less actual renewable energy. This plant should not only be denied the permit, it needs to be shut down. In Executive Order 246, North Carolina's transformation to a clean, equitable economy, Governor Cooper stated on January 7th, quote, whereas all North Carolinians, irrespective of economic status, cultural heritage, race, religion, or zip code, have the right to enjoy a sustainable environment with clean air, clean water, and clean soil that is free from environmental injustice, end quote. And in Section 11, Public Health Equity, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services shall provide, quote, information about effects on children and disproportionate effects on underserved communities and people of color, unquote. Were those words sincere or mere rhetoric? We will see. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buckley. Jeff Hunt is up next, followed by Hannah Jeffries.
Jeff Hunt, if you could press *3 so that I can see which number you're using to call in. I see a Jeffrey Curry II, or Jefferson Curry II. I don't see a Jeff Hunt listed. So if you called in, or if you're Jefferson Curry II, please raise your hand by either pressing *3 on your phone or using WebEx.
Matt Jefferson Curry is scheduled to speak later in the presentation, so we'd still be looking for Jeff Hunt as a possible call-in user. If he doesn't raise his hand, we can come back later.
Yeah, I guess one last chance for Jeff for right now, Jeff Hunt. And if not, yep, okay, we'll circle back at the end. So next up is Hannah Jeffries, to be followed by Katie Moore.
Hannah, if you have called in, please press *3 so I can see which call-in number you're calling in from.
And we might also add, if you've previously raised your hand and have already spoken, please lower your hand.
I see someone that's lowered their hand and then re-raised their hand. Perhaps this is her.
Is this Hannah Jeffries?
Yes, it is. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go right ahead.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate the time to speak. This is Hannah Jeffries. I am with the Robeson County Cooperative of Sustainable Development. I am also a recent UNC Pembroke alumni, fall 2001, with a degree, fall 2021, oh my gosh, with a degree in American Indian Studies. I identify as Afro-Indigenous, and I'm an enrolled member of the Meherrin tribe. As a resident of Lumberton, I live on the same side of town as the NCRP facility. And since moving to the area for school, I experienced sometimes very difficulty of breathing because of the facility and the quality of the air. In doing further research of the NCRP facility, I find it interesting that the company believes it does not need to replace or have adequate equipment in place to accurately calculate the emissions being released on daily production, while their sister facility in Georgia, ran by the same company, does not have this issue whatsoever. They're able to have the adequate equipment in place. This makes NCRP facility argument very much invalid. If other areas of their company are able to have the equipment, why should this one be held to any different of the standard? If anything, it needs to be held to a higher standard. Very valid, very arbitrary. And the levels of burning this emission of the NCRP facility is so much higher burning this poultry litter than burning of coal and making it more harmful. I'm using my voice for the NCRP facility to be held accountable for its violations, to be shut down and unable to operate in the state of North Carolina. As an Indigenous woman, I follow the teachings of the 7 generations, meaning that everything that happens in my life has been influenced by the 3 generations above me, and everything I do in this life, the actions will impact the generations below me. And for me particular, I'm the 7th daughter. I'm the last generation. So I'm getting ready and preparing for the 6 generations after me. This is not the air quality, the land quality I want my generations to follow to inherit. So I'm asking, please, that this facility be shut down. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Katie Moore, followed by Shelby Klein.
Hi, my name is Katie Moore. I'm a resident of Roxborough, North Carolina. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I have worked for over 8 years in the field of public health on air pollution and environmental justice issues, and I want to submit a comment tonight in strong opposition to the proposed NCRP permit modification. This facility is a bad actor, and the permit as proposed would retroactively authorize illegal emissions and let those emissions continue in a vulnerable community that is already greatly overburdened. While operating as with a minor source permit, NCRP has had a suite of Clean Air Act violations, as many others have noted. These include violating emissions limits, improperly removing air pollution control devices, failure to keep accurate records, routinely failing to operate required monitoring technology, and failure to conduct emissions testing. Those last 2 meaning that we really have no idea what they were truly emitting. As someone who has looked at a lot of facility documents, these are basically all of the things that you can do as a facility to emit more and skirt regulations that are designed to protect public health. It is rare in my experience and very concerning to see them all happening at a single facility. If this permit is approved, it will be adding more pollution into a community that is already greatly overburdened. The NCRP site itself is a brownfield, as someone else has mentioned. Phase 1 and 2 assessments at the site have shown extensive metal and VOC contamination of both groundwater and soil. The area is surrounded by many other facilities and already has some of the most polluted air in the state. According to EPA's EJ screen, the area around NCRP is in the 88th percentile for fine particulate matter pollution in the state and the 91st percentile for air toxics cancer risk. This permit would make that worse, and the uncertainty in the permit, especially around emissions from storage of litter and fly ash, mean that the air pollution coming from the site might be significantly higher than reported in the permit. In January of this year, Governor Cooper signed Executive Order 246, affirming the need to shift quickly to renewable energy and to ensure that transition does not add to existing environmental injustices in the state. This permit is in opposition to that vision. I strongly urge the DAQ to deny this permit and to shut down the site. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Shelby Klein, followed by Meredith Allen.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Great. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Shelby Klein. I'm an environmental justice organizer and researcher with Clean Water for North Carolina. To start, North Carolina Renewable Power should not be issued this permit. The facility is a bad actor with a history of violations. Some operating emissions are higher now than when it was a coal plant. A few of its violations from the past 5 years include routinely failing to operate required monitoring technology, violating emissions limits for fine particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur dioxide, and improperly removing needed air pollution controls, among many other infractions. While it may have renewable in its name, this is not an example of green energy. The environmental impacts are numerous, especially with this defective draft permit. As this permit currently stands, it sets limits based on a 30-day average period, which means that spikes in harmful emissions that happen over hours or days may be considered lawful rather than violations. When you take into account all the equipment and storage, the estimated current emissions are too low. Better technology is even available, and Georgia Renewable Power, the parent company, has already implemented those better technologies in other operations. So NCRP is a toxic neighbor. For the mainly BIPOC and low-wealth communities near this operation, it is a threat to their health and well-being. Some health concerns include cardiovascular disease, cancer, respiratory illness, and other diseases. Robeson County already has some of the worst air impacts in the state, and permitting NCRP would only serve to increase a cumulative burden to communities worn down by other polluters. DAQ, please do what's right and deny this permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Meredith Allen, followed by Tina Katsanos.
Hi, I'm Meredith Allen, and I'm a resident of Robeson County, and I also work with Robeson Cooperative for Sustainable Development. I currently live on the same side of town as this facility, and our county already has some of the worst air in North Carolina. In 2018, I was personally impacted by the air quality. My husband was rushed to the ER with a collapsed lung and had to have half a lung removed after being a non-smoker all of his life. He was diagnosed with a lung condition called lung blebs, which is blisters on the lungs. This is due to high carbon dioxide levels in the air. My son, who is 15, has also been raised in this community and was diagnosed with asthma at a very young age and still suffers with it greatly to this day. This is unfair and unjust way for us to have to live in a community that is so beautiful. As others have stated, they've continued to be in violation daily. And I ask that not only this permit be denied, but that this facility be shut down. I don't think that it's fair where they place these facilities, with it being lower class and Black and brown communities. And I just ask, please, please consider our comments in shutting this facility down. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tina Katsanos, followed by Reverend Mack Legerton.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Good evening. My name is Tina Katsanos. I'm the chair of the North Carolina NAACP State Conference Environmental Justice Committee. I am the chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg NAACP Climate Justice and Green Jobs Committee, and I am the community engagement leader for the Charlotte Climate Reality Project. I am speaking on behalf of all of these organizations. We are in opposition of the North Carolina's so-called Renewable Power Company's permit application. The permit should not be granted, as this company is a source of dangerous air pollution and harms the surrounding environmental justice communities. A company with a track record of numerous violations and unpaid fines, and the continual deficiencies in their operations, should not be allowed to renew its permit and should certainly not be allowed to expand its facilities. Support of this company means continued support of poorly regulated factory farms, which allow for the expansion of biomass industries, all of which negatively impact eastern North Carolina counties and the Sandhills and coastal plains with regard to their air quality. The greenwashing of these industries is also insidious, as they confuse the public about the true nature of their operations that are hardly renewable, much less clean. This confusion in the minds of the public sows seeds of doubt as to what is truly clean and renewable. And that doubt is this industry's greatest weapon against public calls for accountability. Whereas economies may superficially seem to benefit from their business, this is a short-term accounting that does not factor in the external costs of negatively impacted human health and the overall exacerbation of environmental degradation and the exacerbation of the climate crisis. Do not grant this greenwashing company license to continue harming environmental justice communities in Robeson County and other Eastern North Carolina counties. Do not give this company license to continue emitting high CO2 emissions, damaging all of our futures. North Carolina DAQ, please use your power equitably and responsibly to not only not grant this permit, but to shut down the facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thanks everybody for sticking to the 3-minute time limit. Next up, we have Reverend Mack Legerton, followed by Larry Baldwin.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yes, I'm Reverend Mack Legerton, co-director of the Robeson County Cooperative for Sustainable Development. I'm speaking tonight to urge the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality to deny the air quality draft permit application of North Carolina Renewable Power. This highly polluting facility is located right across the river from the city of Lumberton and on the poorest side of town. Along with its extensive record of violations and noncompliance, NCRP is unwilling to propose and utilize the most effective pollution controls available to this company and its parent company. This requested permit needs to be denied. Our people in Robeson County and North Carolina deserve the same emission controls and standards that operate in the state of Georgia, where this company sticks to its agreements and emissions with the state Department of Environmental Quality in the state of Georgia. NCRP agreed with our state to reduce its emissions and has not done so year after year, day after day. Now it wants a permit to keep its emissions at the same high level, basically making its past violations legal. The draft permit also fails to require adequate monitoring to protect air quality and public health. A similar facility in another state that monitors its emissions on an hourly basis. But in this draft permit, NCRP only sets limits and monitoring based on a 30-day averaging period. This means that the daily spikes in harmful emissions that have occurred over these last many years could occur every hour and every day, and then lowered on other days, and this could be considered lawful rather than violations as they have been fined and in the past for non-compliance. The majority of our local people in Robeson County are totally unaware of the types and levels of pollution being released by North Carolina Renewable Power. If we had known about the extent of the violations and non-compliance, we as a community could have assisted DEQ in holding this company responsible for complying with its agreements to our state authorities. It is shocking to learn how long this facility has violated both federal and state environmental laws on a daily basis, year after year, without being shut down. I respect the authority of our DEQ and recommend that this facility be closed in order to protect the environmental and public health of our county that is already overburdened by 800 polluters in this largest county in North Carolina. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend. Next up, we have Larry Baldwin, followed by Lois Nilsson.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. My name is Larry Baldwin, and I am with Waterkeeper Alliance. It's somewhat unimaginable to me that we're even having this conversation to start with, that we would be talking about issuing an air permit to a facility that has shown by their track record that they are, as a number of other people have said, they're not good neighbors. First of all, the facility is built on a current brownfield site of what was originally a coal-fired power plant. You put these two together and you're just asking for problems. The fact alone that it's being built on a brownfield site should have raised the alarm, but its current practices or practices up to currently having been so egregious, there should not even be a consideration about a new permit. Burning wood and poultry litter, as this facility is doing, is actually dirtier than burning coal. The facility was and is still emitting pollutants greater than the Clean Air Act limits. So why is this facility continuing to operate? They've had so many violations, as you've heard so far this evening from many other speakers, and now they're seeking approval for a permit that would allow them to continue to pollute at the current level, and also allowing them to basically get a free pass on the pollutants that they have been doing so far during their operation. The repeated violations, along with the deceitful practices of NCRP, should automatically prevent them from obtaining an updated permit. We put a lot of trust and faith in our state agencies, the DEQ, for DAQ, DWR. These agencies are supposed to protect the people and to protect the environment. In this particular case, they are woefully wrong if this permit is allowed to go through. It's the people of this state, particularly the people in Lumberton and the county, who are going to be impacted the most directly in the most egregious ways. So it is my request, it is my fervent request. I'd almost like to make it a demand, but that probably wouldn't go over well. But this has got to stop. North Carolina is being sold down the river, no pun intended, being a waterkeeper. It's time for our state agencies to stand up for the people of North Carolina. Please deny this air permit request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Next up, we have Lois Nilsson, followed by Karen Bearden.
Hello, this
Yep,
is Lois Nilsson. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Thank you for giving me this time to speak. I live in Raleigh. I am co-chair of the Raleigh chapter of the Climate Reality Project. Regarding the permit application to reclassify NCRP as a major source under the Prevention of the Significant Deterioration Program, I'm vehemently opposed. This is not a well-run facility. It defies logic that the agency entrusted to protect North Carolina's air, water, and population from pollution would allow continuation of this harmful activity. It sounds to me that in doing so, the state would be giving a bad actor permission to become an even worse actor. Since it began operating in this facility, NCRP has been emitting pollutants at rates far exceeding the Clean Air Act. They are guilty of numerous violations of their permit. Even with the taxpayer funds it receives, NCRP does not put in the same pollution control equipment it is using in other states. Is it okay to pollute more in North Carolina for the same activity? Please, DEQ, tell them it ain't so. NCRP cannot control its emissions as a minor source, so instead of fixing the situation, their solution is to become a major source. Let me give you an analogy. Say I had a 12-year-old child who got drunk every night and told me he couldn't stop. His big idea to fix the situation is I should lower the drinking age limit. Seems like the same kind of logic that NCRP is using. The city of Lumberton is less than a mile away from NCRP. That's roughly the same distance between DEQ on Jones Street and the Raleigh Memorial Auditorium. Before approving this permit change, please ask yourselves if you would be okay placing this facility operated by the same company so close to your own family. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And next up, we have Karen Bearden, followed by Dana Powell.
Great. Howdy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, yay. My name is Karen Bearden, and I am the 350 Triangle Coordinator. There's been some great comments tonight. Thank you so much, everybody, for your awesome comments. We stopped the Atlantic Coast Pipeline in 2020, and now Robeson County is fighting this toxic NCRP power plant, which is not renewable. It's terrible greenwashing from the company by giving it that name. It drives me crazy every time I hear it. The plant is a major emitter of carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, particulates, hazardous air pollutants, toxic air pollutants, and too many other potentially dangerous emissions. DEQ should have required NCRP to apply for a major permit before the construction and operation began. The governor has issued executive orders to limit greenhouse gases and to control pollution in environmentally impacted communities. DEQ, please, please take into account the too many violations already committed by NCRP and the cumulative impacts of the way too many toxins the community already lives with. This permit should not be granted.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Dana Powell, followed by Skip Hudspeth.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Dana Powell. I'm Associate Professor of Environmental Anthropology, and I'm a multi-generation descendant of Eastern North Carolina. I have deep, deep ties to this region. And I'm speaking to urge the Department of Environmental Quality to deny the air quality permit that's been requested by NCRP. As my colleagues and others have stated already, the draft permit fails to require adequate monitoring, and the company has a proven track record of violating environmental laws. This is bad science and bad politics for both North Carolina Renewable Power and our state. There's been no meaningful input by community early in this process. The disregard of full participation by a community deeply impacted by industrial harms is being noted far and wide in regard to what's going on in North Carolina right now. Robeson County in particular has carried the burden of industrial development for decades with no economic benefits and all of the environmental and social harms. This is well documented in the research, and this is an established fact now for this region. This is what the National Environmental Policy Act and others call disproportionately impacted communities. And those of us that work and know these areas understand these are cumulative and disproportionate impacts. So they are aggregated over time and they're unevenly distributed. In my own research, I've studied the rise and collapse of coal-fired power plants in the US Southwest, and we know that these dirty plants need to be decommissioned and dismantled rather than transitioned into even dirtier facilities in the name of renewable and green power. This is not a good transition strategy. I urge the DEQ to protect Robeson County and the wider intercoastal plains of this region. This region is a treasure to our state and the wider East Coast. It is nearly unmatched in biodiversity and cultural diversity. This is a region to protect and defend, not to continue to sacrifice. We have an opportunity here as North Carolinians to turn the corner and center our efforts on new forms of economic stability, eco and cultural tourism, community-led economies, and more. And we have the collective expertise on this call among all of us to do this. We have the power to turn the corner and to do something very different in this very special region of the Inner Atlantic coastal plains. The Department of Environmental Quality has a public responsibility to the public to ensure environmental quality, not create an easy pathway for polluters. Thank you.
Very good timing. Thank you. Next up is Skip Hudspeth, followed by Connor Kipp.
Looks like Skip called in on a phone. If you can press *3 to raise your hand so I can identify you. Let's see if this is him. I have a 704-641 number. That's the only number we have. Skip, is this you?
Yes, it is.
Okay, please provide your comments.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I live in Johnson Davis Road up in Huntersville, North Carolina, on Catawba lands on the Catawba River. I want to thank you for providing this opportunity for hearing public input on this important issue. I'm deeply concerned about the impact of NCRP's incineration power generation facility on the health of nearby communities. According to a 2021 county rankings compiled by the University of Wisconsin and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Robeson County ranks dead last in both health factors, environmental, social, and economic conditions, and in health outcomes, lifespan, and self-reported health status. Cancer, heart disease, chronic respiratory diseases, and cerebrovascular diseases, such as stroke, are the 4 leading causes of premature death in Robeson County. All of these are associated with and exacerbated by air pollution. The NCRP plant is a major emitter of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, particulates, hazardous air pollutants, and a range of other potentially dangerous pollutants. And combined with the other pollution sources in the area, Robeson County has some of the worst air impacts in the state. A Title V permit would allow NCRP to emit enormous amounts of pollution in Robeson County to a county that's already endangered and marginalized by the other effects and by their economic situation there. So NCRP has also violated numerous special orders of consent, and their repeated offenses, in my view, no longer justify another chance to operate within the limits of the law. Our state of North Carolina has set goals for transitioning to clean, renewable energy sources and for addressing environmental inequities. The governor has issued multiple executive orders to limit greenhouse gases and to control pollution in environmentally impacted communities. Your DEQ Clean Energy Plan states the following key recommendations. To successfully transition to a clean energy future, North Carolina must establish a 21st century regulatory model that incentivizes business decisions that benefit both utilities and the public in creating an energy system that is clean, affordable, reliable, and equitable. He goes on to provide some critical overarching recommendations, including to modernization of the grid to support clean energy resource adoption, resilience, and other public interest outcomes. I think this is a huge public interest forum, and there's a lot of public interest in the outcome of what you do. So this company relies on taxpayer dollars to remain open. As a taxpayer, I object to this company continuing to harm the community. So I ask you to look at the power you have and to step up and beyond business as usual to protect the people and the environment in Lumberton and cease issuing permits to a company that continually violates them. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Connor Kipp, followed by Stuart Phelps.
Hello, all. I am Connor Kippy, policy analyst and advocate at Toxic Free NC, a nonprofit environmental health advocacy organization, which is located in former Occoneechee and Saponi land in Durham, North Carolina. Thank you to the staff helping to put this hearing on and to the community members and advocates that have come forward to make their voices heard. First off, I want to say that we stand in solidarity with our personal relations in the area, including Anita Cunningham and other members of the community that have spoken tonight, in calling for DAQ to deny this permit. Robeson County and Lumberton itself are the site of many undue burdens, ones that are harmful for the people that live there and the land they live on. The DAQ knows the population demographics of this area. I won't waste time talking about that. Other than mentioning Robeson County faces the highest amount of different external environmental health factors as found by a research institute at the University of Wisconsin. To continue to let another environmental health factor, the different air pollutants emitted from this so-called renewable energy plant, who has flagrantly violated previous air and water permits to continue to drop these materials that are chronically toxic to this community, admits to placing the final straw, or in this case, poultry cakes and wood pellets on the camel's back. DAQ has the authority and statutory mandate to deny this permit under the context of cumulative impacts, as mentioned earlier, and it has an additional popular mandate via executive orders, EO 80 and EO 246, calling for greenhouse gas reductions and other environmental justice concerns to deny this permit. The mixture of fuels used by this quote unquote renewable energy plant has been demonstrated on top of all of its toxic effects to also be much worse in the context of producing greenhouse gases, something that will just continue to add layers to the environmental health concerns already felt by this community. Please deny this permit. Thank you for this time.
Okay, thank you. Up next, we have Stuart Phelps, followed by Joe Irving.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Go right
Good
ahead.
evening. Or in my case, actually, good morning, because I'm calling you from Bristol in the UK, 3,800 miles away. So you may wonder what I've got to add. Ironically, I sit in part of inner city Bristol, which has a remarkably similar situation to Lumberton. The population is about the same size. The health inequalities, the race inequalities, the class inequalities are very similar. We've been monitoring air pollution as a collection of citizen groups for the last 5 years. And we are now reaching a point where we're having to put in some 20 sites involving something like 50 monitors across a 1 square mile area to get a true picture of the air pollution at ground level being breathed in by people in the inner city. And we're looking at a whole range of pollutants. I'm only too familiar with a lot of what people have been talking about in terms of the problems of so-called green energy. And we've found that it is so difficult to effect a real transition from the sort of energy systems that we've had in the past to the ones we have in the future, that a collection of citizen groups and businesses are now about to use a piece of legislation in the UK called the Localism Act, in which we will devise our own planning rules and energy rules within the law as prescribed by the government to effect a transition from the situation we're in to the one we're going to. What we've learnt the hard way is you can't make dirty energy clean. You have to start again. And at that point, I will say thank you for listening to what I've got to say. I wish you luck and good night.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next up, we have Joe Irving, followed by Andy Wood.
Joe, I've unmuted your line. Please provide your comment. Mr. Joe Irving? I've unmuted his line. Perhaps he stepped away. We can come back to him.
Yeah, a few more seconds. Joe, are you there? Okay. We'll pass on Joe and get back to him at the end. Next up is Andy Wood, followed by Ann Stewart.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Andy Wood. I'm Director of Coastal Plain Conservation Group based in Pender County. Thank you for allowing me to provide public comment on the matter of NC Renewable Power polluting a community already overburdened by existing air polluting industries. Burning chicken litter and chicken parts to capture methane gas is based on a highly polluting form of industrial agriculture that is renewable in word only. Burning chicken waste is not renewable. Calling it renewable is greenwash marketing, and the fact that it is a biofuel means burning it produces many of the same and worse chemical compounds as burning fossil fuels. The NCRP energy scheme emits and does not capture methane and carbon dioxide, and is not in keeping with the North Carolina Clean Energy Plan, which seeks to reduce electric power sector greenhouse gas emissions by 70% below 2005 levels by 2030 and attain carbon neutrality by 2050. It also hopes to foster long-term energy affordability and price stability for North Carolina's residents and businesses by modernizing regulatory and planning processes. Also accelerating clean energy innovation, development, and deployment to create economic opportunities for both rural and urban areas of the state are something that burning chicken waste just doesn't rise to. The North Carolina Renewable Power Plant needs to be shut down simply because its operation runs contrary to goals of the state's clean energy plan. NC Renewable Power is knowingly exposing their neighbors to harmful pollution emitted too often illegally by their woefully inefficient energy scheme, referred to as renewable energy. In its mission, NCDEQ commits to providing science-based environmental stewardship for the health and prosperity of all North Carolinians. Air pollution permits for this dirty energy source are being sought by a corporation that located its operation in an already environmentally stressed community. NCRP is a for-profit venture that provides little benefit to the residents who are exposed to their toxic air pollutants. To avoid shaming North Carolina's residents, we ask NCDEQ to deny NCRP future air pollution permits simply because their activity harms citizens of the state and does not move North Carolina toward a clean energy future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ann Stewart, followed by John Spruill.
Hi, thank you for hearing me. Anita and others have clearly spoken. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Ann Stewart. I'm a resident of Pender County, but I'm very concerned about the health and welfare of my fellow North Carolina citizens and friends in Lumberton. So thank you for hearing my concerns. Anita and others have clearly spoken to the multiple violations by NC Renewable Energy, and she and others echo my concerns about permitting a company that hasn't met previous required standards. I also second her request to deny the permit and that this facility be shut down as a clear signal that DEQ's regulations are serious, that they have teeth, and that they need to be followed to the letter, or those that are in violation will face consequences. Otherwise, why have regulations at all? But I want to turn my attention to issues related to the emissions that are not well reported or captured by NCRP's inadequate control technologies. First of all, poultry feed itself contains organic arsenic compounds used to improve growth rates by controlling parasitic diseases. By design, a lot of this is excreted, but some of it still remains, or it's excreted into the manure so that you don't eat it when you eat the bird. However, what goes in must come out somehow, and what comes out of those chickens and turkeys is arsenic. It's a well-known, well-documented human carcinogen. Prolonged ingestion of water of it in water manifests as toxicity in practically all systems of the body. What isn't captured with any pollution controls stays in the fly ash. So what happens to that fly ash? If it should leach out, be used as fertilizer, it gets into the water and it adds arsenic to the groundwater wells and water bodies. Next, I'm going to talk about emissions containing sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, and hydrofluoric acid. Why are these important? Well, let's go to what else is in poultry litter. Dioxins. We know about Agent Orange, Love Canal, Times Beach, Missouri. The main source of dioxins in the environment are waste burning incinerators, which mixed with metals such as copper, iron, and zinc, which are also in poultry feed, act as catalysts to form those dioxins. In its most toxic form, dioxins are a group 1 carcinogen linked to birth defects, miscarriages, decreased fertility, diabetes, learning disabilities, immune system depression, and lung problems, many of which you've already heard about. Dioxins bioaccumulate in animal fat, and so citizens of the area there have a double whammy. They're eating and breathing the toxin, which is so toxic in its toxicity, it's measured in nanograms and picograms. Please, DEQ, be the lead stewardship agency for the protection of North Carolina's environmental resources. Please live up to that sacred responsibility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stewart. Ms. Stewart. Next up is John Spruill, followed by Hua Huang.
John Spruill, I believe I've identified your line, and I've unmuted you.
Good evening. I'm Jack Spruill. Am I connected with you?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Yes, I'm Jack Spruill, participating from Pender County. It's very personal for me to think that our North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality is considering yet another wink and nod to this demonstrated polluting industry in Robeson County. I lived and worked in Lumberton 1989 to 93. Even after my bank transferred me to Winston-Salem, a significant part of my responsibilities remained in Lumberton. The good people I knew there, both as bank associates and as community members, deserve much better than this proven polluting industry. This is not a renewable power operation. It is mutton disguised as lamb. It is an operation that relies on subsidies from our North Carolina government and polluting industries to underwrite the burning of harmful toxic waste from captive animal feeding operations and other industries, rather than addressing the root waste creation and disposal issue. Please deny this permit. This is one more case before the North Carolina Division of Air Quality that cries out for the application of the standards of the U.S. National Environmental Policy Act to require a cumulative environmental impact analysis, including environmental justice impact, before approving this permit. Oh, I can guess you're already saying to yourselves, Jack, that's all well and good, but that's not our job. We are air quality regulatory analysts. Well, I ask you, if it's not your job, whose job is it? Is it the job of dozens of Robeson County residents in this hearing, plus the dozens of other citizens in the hearing who live elsewhere in the state? Whose job is it, I ask you? Whose job is it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spruill. Next up is Hua Huang, followed by Will Hendrick.
Can folks hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Actually, hold on 1 second. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Gotta be Okay, I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you for tonight. My name is Hua Huang. I'm from Atlanta, Tuscarora, that is present-day Raleigh, and I'm with the North Carolina Sierra Club, calling for the denial of NCRP's application request to modify the permit despite a history of air quality violations. NCRP has produced energy from materials including but not limited to burning of wood chips and poultry litter, and recently have even bought a coal-fired power regeneration plant, Cogentrix, using biomass for energy. Burning these materials is actually turning out to be dirtier than coal on a per megawatt basis for most pollutants. Since the start of NCRP's operations, they consistently increase the amount of litter burned. The company has stated that they want to burn 85 to 100% poultry waste. The NCRP facility was and still is emitting pollutants at rates that exceeds the Clean Air Act's major source threshold, but the facility never obtained the major source permit necessary to protect air quality and public health. DEQ should have required NCRP to apply for a major permit before construction and operation. NCRP has agreed with regulators that it will work to reduce emissions. They have instead, in the past 5 years, violated emission limits in the fine particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxides. They routinely fail to operate required monitoring technology. They've improperly removed necessary air pollution control. They failed to conduct required emissions testing in a timely manner. They've committed numerous other monitoring and record-keeping violations. The facility underestimates emissions of hazardous air pollutants which are those that Congress has listed as toxic and/or carcinogenic, even in very small quantities. You've heard previous speakers stating their concern with cancer. This is very real, and it's clear that the facility is evading even more stringent pollution control technology. Since 2015, numerous citations have been made regarding NCRP by DEQ and DAQ with notice of deficiency and violation due to various issues from exceeding emission limits, poor maintenance, and deficient monitoring, record-keeping, and reporting. Additionally, this does not even begin to address the fact that pollutants from NCRP disproportionately impact marginalized communities. The impacted communities deserve full transparency on how the industry operates so that they can understand the full extent of NCRP operations' impact on their families and their neighbors. The impacted communities also deserve a stronger voice on whether or not NCRP should continue to operate in their community. The NCRP has a history of air quality violations, and to make it worse, the status quo industrial CAFO practices in North Carolina continues to bring harm to the local communities. For these reasons and many more, please consider denial of air permit. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Will Hendrick, followed by Nancy Neely.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Will.
Thank you. My name is Will Hendrick, and on behalf of the North Carolina Conservation Network, I join community partners in recommending the denial of NCRP's permit application. If the agency chooses, despite the concern of impacted residents, to permit continued operation, I urge DAQ to impose more stringent monitoring requirements in the permit, due both to the facility's past noncompliance and its discriminatory impacts on vulnerable North Carolinians. NCRP has a history of permit violations. It has routinely failed to operate required monitoring technology, failed to conduct required emissions testing on time, and committed numerous other monitoring and record-keeping violations. In other words, operators have repeatedly violated past permits to limit the information available about its impacts on the environment. This alone merits additional regulatory scrutiny. Additional monitoring requirements are also imperative to further environmental justice, which demands the meaningful involvement and fair treatment of all North Carolinians, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, and the development, implementation, and enforcement of permits just like this one. As noted in DEQ's own environmental justice report, this facility is surrounded by populations too often deprived of fair treatment. Within 1 mile around the facility, the percentage of Black and Indigenous residents, as well as the percentage of people experiencing poverty, is much higher than the state average. By DEQ's own definition, this facility impacts a potentially underserved community. But this community is not treated fairly if the adverse impacts disproportionately borne by communities of color and low income are ignored or underanalyzed. Objectionably, for instance, the proposed permit sets limits based on a 30-day averaging period, meaning that spikes in harmful emissions over hours or even days may be considered lawful. And as mentioned earlier, the permit wholly ignores emissions of multiple hazardous air pollutants. This begs the question, what other harm is DAQ ignoring? In a recent executive order, Governor Cooper noted the importance of considering cumulative impacts. There's nothing in the draft permit or DEQ's environmental justice report suggesting that the agency ever evaluated the cumulative impact of facilities operating in or around NCRP, or that it seeks to collect additional data necessary to inform such an evaluation in the future. We understand that DEQ has limited resources. We often hear that the agency has limited authority, but neither the agency's budget nor the law prevent DEQ from requiring an applicant for a permit to operate in an underserved community to bear the cost of monitoring necessary to fully document the impact of permitted operations on vulnerable North Carolinians. If you don't require that now, if you don't require it here, then where? I urge DEQ to remember that environmental justice is not achieved solely through notice, not solely through outreach, not solely through meaningful involvement, but rather, as here, requires final decisions that reflect consideration of how to avoid or mitigate the cumulative and discriminatory impact of agency permitted operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendrick. Next up is Nancy Neely, followed by Jefferson Curry II.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Go right ahead.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Neely, and I live in Huntersville, North Carolina. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and for your kind attention. I am speaking to request that NCDEQ deny the air quality permit for NC Renewable Power. NCRP receives taxpayers subsidies, and as a taxpayer, I strongly oppose supporting this industry in general and this facility in particular. NC Renewable Power generates power by incinerating wood chips, poultry litter, and poultry cakes. They sell this power to Duke Energy as, quote, renewable power, unquote, and name their facility accordingly. I suppose that while we allow factory farming, which I am strongly opposed to, by the way, we will always have poultry litter and poultry cakes, so that must be why this product is considered renewable and superior to burning coal. However, the pertinent facts are that the toxic air pollutants and VOC emissions are much greater and much more dangerous than those emitted by a coal plant. There are fewer regulations to adhere to as well, and even those regulations that do exist have been violated more than 10 times by NC Renewable Power. I am concerned for the citizens of Robeson County, especially those that live in Lumberton, right across the river from NCRP. Ask yourself, would you be in favor of issuing a major source permit to a facility like NCRP if it was across the river from your home? Please do the right thing and deny the air quality permit for NC Renewable Power. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Neely. Next up is Jefferson Curry II, followed by Holly Adams.
Jefferson Curry, I've unmuted your line. Please provide your comments.
Did you? Okay, you hear me?
Yes. Yep. Go right ahead.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Jefferson Curry, and I'm an enrolled member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina and employed by Wynyard Rivers Alliance as a Lumbee River Keeper, speaking from the Jonesville community, McGurk's Bridge area of Lumbee Territory. I've been following this facility since I was hired as a Lumber River Keeper in 2018, and I'm here to ask the NCDEQ, please deny this permit and don't allow NCRP to reopen. For once, do the right thing for the local impacted community. From the first year of operations in 2015, NCRP has been repeatedly cited by DEQ with a dozen notice of deficiency, notice of violations due to various issues including exceeding emission limits, poor maintenance, and deficient monitoring, record keeping, and reporting. 2 special orders by consent, one which they obliterated with violations, and has paid over $58,000 in fines. Obviously, nothing is working, and NC Renewable Power should not be allowed to continue violating our laws. Issuing this permit would allow NCRP to emit high levels of carbon monoxide, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, and other pollutants across this community without the best available control technologies that could be put into place. While I know that DEQ consistently ignores cumulative impacts while only giving lip service to caring anything about vulnerable EJ populations, this facility is located alongside majority Black, Indian, Hispanic communities that have lower incomes than the state and county average and have higher than state average health issues and concerns such as heart disease, lung ailments, and cancer. When air quality and EJ concerns are coupled with the ongoing soil and water contamination on site with arsenic, chromium, vanadium from Cogentrix coal-fired plant, the impacts from nearby pollution sources such as identified on EJ's own EJ tool, and the fact that this facility stores poultry litter, toxic fly, and bottom ash, and is located in the floodplain that flooded in 2016 and 2018. NCRP should be Exhibit A, held up as a type of industrial facility that North Carolina refuses to endorse by giving them a permit. Please do the right thing for our lands, waters, and air, and the people of Lumberton, Robeson County, Southeastern North Carolina, and the whole state. Deny this permit and tell NCRP that enough is enough and they need to stay closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Next up is Holly Adams, followed by Elizabeth Rashid.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be able to be here tonight to hear everyone. I am so honored to hear everyone speak tonight. This is such a display of everyone's time, passion, and love for others, a righteousness for what is correct, what needs to happen for correct action. I am incensed, really, that these sort of emperor has no clothes companies and policies strut and just put this forward on the people that live there in their home, their sacred homes, like all of our homes are sacred. I ask that this permit is denied and that this ridiculousness, this sham stops. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Elizabeth Rashid, followed by Sandy McLean. Sally McLean.
Elizabeth, I've unmuted your line.
Great, can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Perfect. Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Rashid, and I'm an attorney at the Southern Environmental Law Center. I want to highlight several concerns that we have with the North Carolina Renewable Power Facility in Lumberton. First, the Division of Air Quality needs to pay specific attention to the site's location and its history. The communities around this site, which are predominantly Black and Indigenous, are already bearing the brunt of far too many sources of industrial pollution, from 21 industrial pollution permits within a 1-mile radius, to be exact. This includes the second industrial site immediately adjacent to the facility, where the division has previously permitted a wood pellet mill owned by the London-based Active Energy Group. This pellet mill will also be a source of air pollution. While neither facility is operational at the moment, the companies have previously stated that they plan to work together, with the pellet mill providing a fuel source for North Carolina Renewable Power. The future air emissions from the pellet mill are still largely unknown, as the experimental technology they plan to undertake has never before been operated on an industrial scale. The combined operations of both facilities will have adverse consequences for the surrounding communities, and the division must seriously consider these cumulative impacts. Additionally, as many commenters have already highlighted tonight, the North Carolina Renewable Power Facility has a severe history of noncompliance with its existing air permit. Within the last 5 years, it has violated emission standards for particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and it has routinely failed to conduct required emissions testing, required monitoring, and required reporting. In fact, the facility operated for years as a major source of air pollution without having obtained a major source permit as required by the Clean Air Act. Although North Carolina Renewable Power is now finally seeking this permit, the company is still attempting to evade the Clean Air Act's requirements by failing to justify why pollution control technology used at Georgia Renewable Power's other facilities to drastically decrease emissions cannot be used here. Finally, the data that North Carolina Renewable Power provided to the division in its permit application severely underestimates the facility's emissions of hazardous air pollutants. What's worse, the division seems ready to accept this, rewarding the company's history of bad behavior to the detriment of the health and safety of the local community. The data shows that poultry litter is in fact a dirty energy source, and the facility must accordingly be held to stricter pollution control limits with better control technology. It should not be allowed to obtain a major source permit to retroactively authorize its repeated violations of the Clean Air Act and of North Carolina law. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rashid. Next up is Sally McLean, followed by Deborah Warren.
Sally, can you please press *3 so I can identify your line? I believe I've identified it. Sally, is this your line?
I hear something. Sally, is this you?
Let's try the next one.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll circle back. Even though we're at the last person signed up on the list, and we'll go back and get the others. Deborah Warren is up next.
Deborah, can you press *3 so I can identify your line? This is the same line. Deborah, is this you? It's got a 252 area code.
It sounds like somebody's on, but maybe not. Okay, so we'll why don't we circle back and pick up all the folks that we weren't able to get through prior. We'll start with Stephen Norris, and then followed by Jeff Hunt.
Stephen, if you can identify your line by pressing *3.
User 8, maybe?
Yeah, user 8. Stephen, is this you?
Mr. Hunt, please press *6 to unmute your line.
And if anyone's already spoken, can you please press *3 to unraise your hand. We have about 12 callers we're trying to sort through.
I was going to say, yeah, so we can narrow it down.
Yeah, Mr. Norris, we've unmuted you on our end. You may need to press *6 on your phone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Norris.
Thank you very much. This
Worth the wait.
technology. Okay. I want to thank you. My name is Dr. Stephen Norris. I live on stolen Cherokee land near Asheville, North Carolina. I want to point out that no one of about the 50 people who have spoken on this call have spoken in favor of this facility. I hope that that has an impact on the hearing officers from Department of Environmental Quality. I also think that everyone on this call probably has heard of Henry David Thoreau and know that he is one of the most important and earliest environmentalists in the history of this country. I dare say many of the people on this call have in your work or in your scholarship referred to him because he was such a wise commentator on the environment and on the ways in which it is both maintained and damaged. What people may not know, however, is the challenge that he put forth for public officials, such as those on this call, who have authority over decisions like the one that is being considered tonight. And I want to read a section of what he wrote in his essay on civil disobedience. The mass of men serve the state not as men mainly, but as machines with their bodies. They are the standing army and the militia, jailers, constables, and in most cases, there is no free exercise whatever of the judgment or of the moral sense. They put themselves on a level with wood and earth and stones, and wooden men perhaps can perhaps be manufactured that will serve the purpose as well. Such command no more respect than men of straw or a lump of dirt. He goes on to say, a wise man will only be useful as a man and will not submit to be clay, who will leave his office if he cannot do what his conscience requires him to do. In this case, with so much wonderful commentary about the problems which North Carolina Renewable Power are imposing and will continue to impose if this permit is granted, it seems to me that Henry David Thoreau, as one of our early environmentalists, is issuing a challenge, not just to us who are the citizens of this state, which of course he is doing, but especially to public officials who have authority to determine in many ways how the environment will be treated in this state and whether or not the people in this state will have an environment that will enable us to thrive as human beings. So thank you very much for taking Henry David Thoreau's challenge seriously. And I expect when you do so, you will deny this permit and North Carolina Renewable Power will go out of business. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Norris. Glad we're finally able to get to you. Next up is Jeff Hunt. If Jeff Hunt is available. To be followed by Joe Irving. Jeff Hunt.
If you could raise your hand by pressing *3. I don't see his name on the WebEx computer interface. Okay.
And I'll remind folks when we're done with this that there are alternate ways of commenting. Joe Irving up next.
Hello,
Okay, I see
can
him
you hear
there.
me this time?
Yes. Hey, was that you, Joe? I think I
Yes,
heard you.
brilliant.
Go right ahead.
Hi, I'm calling in from the UK again, so I guess it's 1 in the morning here. And I'm part of the Axtrax Coalition, a coalition of groups and communities against the biggest wood burning and biomass power station in the world, which is just 20 miles down the road. And hearing all of this opposition across continents, I can't believe that we're here again talking about something that's so ridiculous as a power station like this. And yeah, I don't have much more to add than the wonderful organizers and people that have been talking on this call. The 100% opposition, which cannot be overstated, to power stations like this. And I just want to take this opportunity to say well done and thank you to everyone who's come here to oppose, that you're being heard not necessarily by the officials here, but by people across the world, and that we will win. And that we can, and that you need to do everything we can, that in the UK we're doing everything we can to stop power stations like this. They're being taken to court over horrific air pollution violations. We're protesting, we're physically putting ourselves in line of the fuel being transported to the power stations. We're doing everything we can to slam on the brakes to horrifically polluting industries like this. And I just encourage everyone to do what they can within their own power, whether that's denying permits, protesting, campaigning, writing to your officials, calling your officials, or whether it even becomes to the point of putting your body in the line, quite literally, here in the UK, to stop the train of destruction that starts across the globe and ends up in the UK, as well as this power station as well. And yeah, just we can do this, even if the government officials don't. So shut this power station down and shut down all power stations like it before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you, and especially thanks for staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning local time. Appreciate that. Next up, we have Holly Adams, followed by Sally McLean. Oh wait, I'm sorry, Holly. Holly already spoke. Sally McLean, followed by Deborah Warren.
Sally, if you can press *3 to raise your hand so I can identify your line. I have 2 other callers that called in and have spoken already from the same area code, but I don't see anyone new having raised their line, except for that one line we tried where we just heard some ruffled feedback.
Right. Okay. So that was both for Sally McLean and for Deborah Warren. You tried for both of them.
Matt, could we just try to unmute call-in user 4 again, just to see if they answer on that line?
Yeah, I've unmuted it.
Hello.
Yes. Who is this?
This is Hannah Jeffries. I've actually already spoken tonight. I'm just still on to the call to listen.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let's try this other one with the same area code. Hello? Is Sally or
Deborah?
Or Deborah there? Okay,
Yep.
looks like they may have to submit written comments.
Right, exactly. Okay, I'll move on to the next part, and which provides some of the information. Okay, so if you still want to provide comments on the issuance of an air quality permit to North Carolina Renewable Power Lumberton LLC, remember that there are several ways to provide comments until the end of the comment period on February 24th, 2022. You can call 919-707-8430 and leave a voicemail message with your first and last name, whom you are representing, and state your comments on the proposed permit. Or you can provide written comments until the comment period ends on February 24th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. To provide written comments, please email them to daq.publiccomments@ncdenr.gov with NCRP.17C in the subject line to help us identify. You can mail written comments to the address listed in the public notice. You can fax written comments to 919-715-0717, and please address it to Ms. Betty Gaetano. I would like to thank everyone for your attendance. Yes, go ahead.
I apologize
Michael.
if I could interrupt for a second. Just wanted to reemphasize that submitting the comments after the hearing to the phone number 919-707-8714.
I was afraid that
That's okay.
Change it in the 8714.
Yes, what we've had on the screen all evening. So if anybody wants to provide verbal comments on voicemail, 919-707-8714. That's what's listed on our website and what was posted in the newspaper as well. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Michael. Yeah. When I was reading it, I had this thought of, I hope this is the right number, but yeah, thanks for correcting me. So we're wrapping up at this point. I would like to thank everyone for your attendance this evening and for your interest in this public hearing process. Based on the information received during tonight's virtual public hearing and comments received throughout the comment period, I will make a recommendation to the Director of the Division of Air Quality for his consideration in making a final decision on whether to issue, modify, or deny the air permit to North Carolina Renewable Power Lumberton LLC. Again, thank you for your cooperation, attendance on this virtual public hearing, and interest in air quality permitting process. This public hearing is now adjourned.